There we go. Okay. All right, great. I'll do a quick introduction to Will McLendon. Will, I think from memory you're in Florida, is that right?
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. So Will's joining us all the way from over there in sunny Florida to talk about universal resource scheduling at scale. So without further ado, any questions, put them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that. And then at appropriate points, if that's all right, Will, I might chip in with a question. But don't worry too much about that. I'll manage the chat unless you have the time to look for questions. But take it away in that case.
I'll let you manage the chat. I'm not going to be looking at the chat during the presentation, so
No problem.
unless it pops up. So I'll let you manage that. Appreciate that.
Okay, great.
All right. So hi, I'm Will McLendon. I live in Florida and I work at Hitachi Solutions. And really, my presentation is universal resource scheduling at scale. Bear with me as I live in the U.S. I'm gonna say scheduling, not scheduling. So forgive me for the the mispronunciation of the word, right? But URS at scale. We're going to talk about what is URS, how customers can adopt it, really what were the learnings from the projects that I participated in when deploying URS or Universal Resource Scheduling, as we like to call it. Also, we're going to demo change notifications, a little bidirectional sync, and also go through a brief high-level overview of what were some of the findings on my journey with some of the projects. So let's get started. Should be about 30 minutes or so, and we'll have a brief segment for Q&A. So scheduling in D365. What is URS or Universal Resource Scheduling? Well, really, it's its own separate solution. It's the scheduling engine in D365. It allows organizations, regardless of their industries, regardless of the scenarios, to assign resources to any job or task. Now, we see it more commonly used with field service, right? To assign work orders to a technician in a specific area, but it's also used in customer service for scheduling tools to book cases when a customer service rep to the right department, regardless of their time zones. We also see it in PSA, right? You can use it to schedule staff or resources, consultants who are available and who also have an appropriate skill set. So we've seen it used across the board, but really it's its own separate solution that you can use for anything. So why use URS? Why use it? Well, an organization really wants to optimize the availability and work for their resources. So what you'll see them do is you'll see them adopt this. They'll have a list of the resources availability, their skills, things such as promised time windows, BUs, and territories. So what is a resource? Well, a resource is a person, place, or thing. So that could be a person like myself. It could be a facility. It can be a piece of equipment. It can be a crew. A resource is a person, place, or thing. And really, when a customer has a requirement, we want to be able to give that resource the opportunity to fulfill that request. Again, you see how URS has fit into field service. We hear it used in PSA and anytime in CE, but really ROS fills in those resource scheduling gaps for any organization. So earlier you heard me said it helps you to assign tasks. Why don't we just use activities? It's out of the box, it's easy to set up, right? We should just use it. It's a bit different, okay? So activities, those are usually events that are initiated by myself or somebody on my team, right? Tasks like, meetings, sales calls, sending emails, telephone calls, things like that. Resource scheduling, the journey starts with the customer or an IoT device or an alert or a case. That's more of a task that somebody wants me to do for them. Really, you can't assign activities to equipment or things like this. Resource scheduling is used for an enterprise grade solution that allows customers to get a holistic view of the resources availabilities, its capabilities, so they can assign them to the right customer's requests. So it's a bit different than activities, right? So why do we use URS? Why can't we just throw in field service or PSA? Just use the whole blown up version. Now, there is a bit of overlap. That's pretty obvious. But really, like let's take field service for example. Field service is based on getting work orders to a specific technician or an asset for inventory management, and it really uses URS to facilitate those things, right? It uses the different scheduling algorithms to assign resources to the right work orders. It does all that magic. But really, you can use URS because it's Microsoft's schedule anything solution. So, take for example, there are times when we're going through the customer's requirements. We understand that we need to create a new entity or table, as we're calling it now. And then we come to realize, hey, we may need to schedule this. We need to make this data schedulable, right? Well, that's what URS comes in. You could take any entity, make it schedulable, and then you can take your resources and match those requirements with that custom entities tables. So you have skills, resources, crew scheduling, resource pools, all these availabilities that classify organizations' talent pool with their customers' requests. So you can use URS separately because again, it's its own solution. So you don't have to have field service. Now, let's talk about our customer journey. We understand what URS is. We understand that it's separate. We understand that it's available. It's Microsoft Schedule anything. So how did we use it in this particular customer case? All right. Well, we wanted to capture leads that were requested bookings on the customer's website. So we had a lead scheduling booking on the website. That's a really valuable use case because online scheduling, it helps maximize, lead generation, especially for campaigns, right? It also, this process was facilitated or made way easier because we embedded some information directly on the company's website so they could schedule those meetings. We did this because we really want our customers to feel not just engaged, but connected to an organization. And again, this online experience was made a lot easier because they were able to schedule their meetings with technicians while they were browsing through data on the company's website. So they didn't have to go to a separate place. It was all right there. So our goal was really to get them to the right place, the right person in the right time. And we wanted to give them a great experience. Something as simple as click to schedule on a button on their homepage. So what was the scope? Who was the customer? Well, I can't say, but there are some details. They were a major American retailer, and they had roughly 3,000 users or technicians across the states here, and we had to deliver it really fast. If you spent any time in this industry, we know that customers want results not today, not tomorrow. They wanted them yesterday. They want results fast and they want them now. So we had to develop, that's why we used URS. We had to develop a scheduling solution that had a lot of our requirements available out of the box. Keep in mind too that when we were developing this, there were a few things that we had to assume that really helped us out. When building a scheduling solution, automatically assume that the customer is going to want to connect or the client is going to want to connect via mobile device as well. So always have that in mind when developing your solution, mobile access. Also, performance was a huge factor. Since we were looking for available time slots for those resources, some solutions that we developed um, came up with the idea of ping or querying a resource's calendar and Outlook directly. That sounds like that should work, but at scale, you're going to run into some pretty slow performance cycles. So really, when we asked Microsoft, hey, what do we do? They helped us to understand that a true enterprise solution is really going to leverage the schedule board, because it had all these pre-built capabilities already with the product. And really, you want your system of record to always be D365. So that's what we did. That was our scope. However, there's some things in the background that you need to consider before deploying URS to any client or any organization. Territories, resources, and resource requirements. These are all entities that we know are associated with scheduling. Um, Really, these are the structures that you want to have clearly defined before you just deploy, spin it up, and say, hey, here's the schedule board. Really want to spend time on territories, especially you're having your resources, your skills, your certifications. What can your resources do? What kind of resources are going to be in your organization? And the resource requirements, we understand, I'll say this again, probably a few more times. The resource requirement is that glue that takes what's needed to who's needed in the schedule board and bonds them together. Also, we have infrastructure. Now, the infrastructure piece, we're not talking about the physical infrastructure from a networking perspective. We're talking about the processes. We want to make sure that your organization has processes in place so that they really leverage or get the most out of the schedule board. If they don't, then it's going to be a wasted scenario and they won't get the best out of it, the most out of it. So let's take some time, right? Let's look at our territory structures. The reason why I have this up here, I should have put it in red, but I didn't. It says, don't underestimate territory complexity. If your territory structure is a mess, if it's not clearly defined, well, we understand that in sales, that hurts or that can hurt business productivity, as well as damage relationships with clients and make things more difficult for our account managers, right? But the opposite is true when a territory structure is defined and is clear. Well, things are more productive. You improve customer coverage. You even increase sales. And more importantly, you reduce costs. Who doesn't like more money, right? So, in regards to scheduling, you want to make sure that your territory structures are well defined. So you want resources assigned to a territory. You can use a many to one, a one to many as far as with your resources assigned to your territory. That's up to you. You just want to make sure you have those boundaries defined and resources aren't traveling between territories and things such as that. Also, keep in mind if your territory structure isn't defined, that's really going to hurt you in the long run, especially if you plan on using resource scheduling optimization, RSO. You need to have that clearly defined before you deploy. Okay, so it's worth the conversation to have with the customer. Resource considerations. Now, remember, a resource is a person, place, or thing, right? So we understand that if it's a person, they may not be available or they may have different work hours than resource B in a different time zone, right? Our resources may be have different locational preferences. Some may be location agnostic. Some may start their day at one location and end at the other. You have to take those into consideration before you deploy. Make sure that's defined for your resources. Also, not every resource is the same. Consultant A may have a different set of skills than consultant B. We want to make sure we have that defined or configured in our system before we deploy, right? As well as roles. Some people may work on the outside where others may work on the inside. Some people may work with computer hardware or some may work with computer software. We get it, right? We have these characteristics and roles clearly defined before we deploy. Now, our resource requirements. Now, what are these? As mentioned earlier, this is the glue that bonds scheduling that scheduling solution to any other solution, right? So like if you're using uh, field service, we know that when a work order is created and it needs to be scheduled, it creates that resource requirement. And that resource requirement pulls data from the work order and tells the schedule board, hey, I need to schedule a person, or I need a person who has this criteria, this criteria, this criteria, right? So you want to make sure your resource requirements are defined. In our case, we had really simple requirements. Hence the stormtroopers, it was either they worked on the inside or worked on the outside, right? The requirements were pretty much identical, and our resources had the same skills for the most part. But in other solutions, I've seen that where if you don't use those resource requirements appropriately, it will come back to bite you. Also, my favorite part, customer notifications. We want our customers in the loop, right? We don't want them just to see a pop-up appointment made, and that's the end of our conversations or interactions with them. No, we want to make sure our customers receive email confirmations. We want to get them text messages. We want the sales member, or if it's a sales member or a technician, to receive these notifications. But more importantly, before anything, we want to make sure that everything is tracked in D365. You want the system of record to be D365. Why? Well, you only want one system of record. You can make things more complicated if you're using two systems of records. Wow, say that 3 times fast. But if you're using multiple, if you're using multiple systems, there can be problems with synchronization as well as accurate records being kept, and just you can see the problems compounding more and more from there, right? You really want your system of record to be D365, and you want to keep those interactions tracked so that you can get the most out of your implementation. Take the time to make sure that the client sees that, because some clients will say, no, we want Outlook to be our system of record. That's a no-no, right? You're paying for the product, might as well get the most out of it. All right, so now we're going to get to the fun part. What did we use to track our bookings in Outlook and have them displayed in D365 and then to the calendar, to the website? What do we use to keep that all synced up and make the magic work? Well, you have multiple options, and we're going to consider 4 of those options. Um, we had to keep track of time off requests, a technician's personal appointment. If they're like me, they got to pick up their kids sometimes from school or run to an appointment. Um, we also definitely needed to keep in mind that performance was a major factor. So we had ad hoc scenarios that we needed to account for. So if a technician didn't have time to submit a formal request, but just had to block their time off because they had to take care of something, well, we needed to take that into consideration because that happened a lot with this particular org. All right, so let's look at Microsoft bookings. So I like this because Microsoft bookings that's the entity that the schedule board reads to show who's available, who's not. It's simple. It's a record, right? That's what bookings are. And so this was the easiest one to deploy. We could have had some sort of Canvas app or some other solution that basically would create these bookings, and a technician can enter them, and it would have been great, easy, and fun. However, it did not give you what you wanted as far as bidirectional synchronization. So your technicians would have to keep track of their appointments in Outlook and then kind of manually move them over to the bookings. And if something changed over here, they had to change it over there. Really wasn't necessarily as functional as we liked, and didn't give us what we wanted. However, the ease of management, deployment, and costs were some really good advantages because it kept the system of record in D365. And before I move on to this next slide, I'm going to stop and think. There's also time off requests that you can enter within the system. The reason why we didn't stick with that piece of the application was there was problems in regards to resetting your calendar every time you had to cancel a time off request, and that caused problems for us in the long run. So that's why we didn't use Microsoft Bookings directly like that. Now let me go to um, my favorite one. I can't say enough about Rava. Rava is an awesome software. It's a SaaS solution, It already has the infrastructure built out for the internal synchronization that you need. Implementation was super easy and incredibly manageable. It gave you everything you needed for syncing a technician's calendar with D365 and vice versa. The users wouldn't have been trained. Um, Everything is streamlined and it runs in the back end. However, the only disadvantage that I saw with Riva was the cost, but I had to ding them on something. The sales team does such a good job with working with you on the cost. I really felt like it wasn't a fair disadvantage, but I didn't find a happy medium. The sales team will work with you. Reason why I had it listed as disadvantage in this scenario was primarily because the customer wasn't looking for any additional costs. They had the licensing available in the Power Platform. They wanted us to come up with the more of a holistic uh, solution that leveraged kind of the tools that were already available to us out of the box. So as you'll see in the next slide, we had some solutions that we could throw out, but they didn't want to have any additional overhead, so that's why they didn't choose Riva. But I give Riva 5 stars. Amazing product and great team over there. Now, the Dynamics 365 app for Outlook. We understand that in wave 1 of 2021, there is appointments to bookings that are coming out. This is a great piece. And when we were deploying this solution, however, appointments to bookings wasn't available. So we had to create something that gave us kind of the similar effect. But we really used the Dynamics 365 app for Outlook to do this. It's great. Internal synchronization out of the box is great. You have granular tracking and it's free, right? However, there is two downsides to it. You have to know your audience. Our audience were, I'm trying to be nice, were a group of seasoned individuals. That means they were old. Great guys, great girls, great people, good folks, but they didn't want to do anything different, which I think is common for most of our deployments, right? User adoption can be a bit difficult. However, they didn't want to have to track their appointments in the calendar. They didn't want to do the right click and the tracking. And also, they were really concerned about what happens when they had those ad hoc situations and those emergency scenarios. If I forget to track, what happens then? These are reasons why we didn't go with with the Dynamics 365 app for Outlook. Great solution though, and appointments to bookings is a big deal. So maybe I'll do um, a webinar about that as well when it comes out. So Power Automate was mentioned before. The client really wanted a solution in Power Automate. In the Power Platform, they were paying for the subscriptions. They wanted to find something that was within that wheelhouse. So Power Automate was a solution, and Auntie did an amazing job. So thank you for that, for helping us out with that. But Power Automate version 1, anything that you have that is exposed in Exchange is generally exposed via with Graph APIs, right? And there's two methods. So Graph is the vehicle, and there's two methods that you can use Graph. There is subscriptions as well as queries. And so version 1 for Power Automate use those queries. Now, the trick with queries is that you have to keep track of tokens. So you had to keep track of the skip tokens, the next links, what kind of synchronization were you going to be doing, as well as there was a bit of magic needed in your Power Automate to kind of transform the data before it's ingested in D365. So this led to difficulties with implementation time, development, and performance because the sheer amount of mailboxes that you would have to do this with, 3,000 users, became a bit cumbersome. It was a bit much. So that's the trick. If you're querying, you can't query multiple inboxes. You have to do the query per user. So in this case, there were 3,000 queries that you had to keep track of and managing with, and that was a bit much. So that was listed as a disadvantage. However, Power Automate version 2, now this still used those graph APIs and it used a subscription though. Now, the subscriptions are great, right? Those change notifications are wonderful. As soon as something comes in the inbox, you're notified and the information is sent to wherever you wanted it to go to, right? Um, there's no necessarily need for any data transformation. The only problem is you had to keep track of those subscriptions. So every time you subscribe to a user's inbox, you had to keep track of the subscription ID as well as the validation period, which is every 3 days. So you need to make sure you have a process in place to resubscribe or renew the subscription so that you're always getting those updates. Now, if you wanted to compare Power Automate version 1 against version 2, the best way I can describe it is version 1 using those queries. It's more or less like a full differential backup solution, whereas version 2 with using subscriptions gives you real-time data really quick, really fast. But however, both of them require that you track either subscriptions or tokens. You pick. All right, this is the fun part. This is where we get to see the demo. Now, what we're going to demo is change notifications using those graph APIs that we mentioned. You're also going to see some of the components that we used. Because the information that they give back is written in JSON, I didn't want to necessarily display every property that was listed in those items. So what we did is I kind of trimmed the JSON to what's important so that you can see that, hey, this is what's available to you, and you can develop your own system for tracking and changing items and then dumping it back into CRM. So in order to do that, I had used Cosmos because it's really fast, and also the integration pieces between the Exchange and D365 is being done by Power Automate. So we'll look at some of the data in Cosmos, and you'll also see that in the schedule board that the information is shown up. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me get to my screen. Beautiful. All right, so let's go to my calendar. We're going to enter in an appointment, and we're going to call it Friday happy hour. Who doesn't love happy hours on Fridays? Okay. And we're not going to start it in the morning. That's just bad, I guess. Depends on the Friday, right? We're going to start it at noon, and this happy hour is going to go all the way till the end of the day. All right. Having fun with friends. Okay. So just so you know, there's already been a subscription in the background. I already ran that, already said, hey, I want to subscribe to this user's inbox. What we're going to see is that this appointment is going to show up in D365. But before that happens, about that, guys. Before that happens, I want to show you what some of the data looks like in Cosmos. Let me refresh it. Okay, great. Okay, so you get the booking and you get the ID, and this is a unique ID that Exchange creates per item, per user inbox. You won't have IDs that match in different for different users. This is unique across the board per organization. Also, you have the change key. The change key is the change key literally is different. Changes every time the message is updated. So if you change the times on it, you'll notice that this change key will be a bit different when we do change or edit that appointment. Also, with subscriptions, there's a tag. So in subscriptions, you see create, update, and delete it. You're going to see this tag change every time I make an update or if I delete. So that's the action tag. And this status of complete, well, that's just me. I put that in there just so you can see that the action is completed and it's done. But you have different properties that you can work with and edit and change around to use in Power Automate to really deploy a solution. Also, it even shows you the subject, and we'll talk about that afterwards, but it even shows you the subject of the appointment. So let's go to our schedule board and let's move over to Friday and look. Now, I edited the tooltips as well as the booking on the schedule board. And you see the name of the appointment. You see that the appointment source is from Outlook. You can do that with changing the booking methods. You have your start, your end time, and I even on the booking tooltips put the exchange ID with the change key. Now, I do not expect you to remember it. I just want to show you that you have options available that you can put in D365 if you want to track, and you can have it display these items for the operator so that they know what's current, what's not current. It's up to you. There's a list of properties that are available to you, but this is what you can do within D365 to make the operator's job so much easier. So we see that we have an appointment. Let's have some fun. Instead of Friday, my friends canceled on me. Got to get new friends. But they said, "Hey, let's do it on Monday." Mondays are always fun. Instead of 12, we're going to change it to 2 to 5. Let's go to 2 to 5. We're not going to do till 7. We're going to do 2 to 5 happy hour, and we're going to have fun with new friends, right? We're going to save this. Okay. We're going to go up to Cosmos, and I'm going to hold my breath and pray for this data refresh to come through correctly. Okay, that was quick. All right. So we see that the change key changed. The subject is still the same because I didn't change the subject. I changed the description. That's my bad, my fault. The change key is different. The ID is different, but pay attention to the action. That tag, that's not me. That's something from the system. The system knew based off of the change key that this was going to be updated. So it was able to tag that. We listed it here. We've seen it in Cosmos. And if we look at our schedule board on Friday, nothing's happened. But if we move all the way to Monday, bam. And the information has been updated. The appointment is right at the correct times. And we see those tool tips that we mentioned earlier. Let's have fun. Let's finish the last bit of our cycle because we did create, update. Let's go ahead and delete this appointment because everybody canceled will. All right. You're probably expecting for this item to be deleted in the database. I did not do that. Instead, I rather, come on, you worked so fast last time. All right. So instead I kept it in the database. I wanted you to see the action. It's listed as deleted. You notice that the change key is not there. The item has stayed the same. And if we go to our schedule board, you'll see that it's no longer available and no longer present. So that's the end of our demo. Moving right along. So what did I learn from this entire experience? What happened? Well, as you've seen at the very beginning of our presentation, there's a lot of configuration that goes first with it for URS. You don't have to develop anything new. Well, you can get a lot out of it just by configuring first. So really, that saves the customer and saves you time and saves the customer time. Also, for our customers, budget was king. It was about overhead costs. So that's why we chose some solutions over others. Territories. You have to have a very clean territory structure. In our case, at one time, one deployment that I've done, they had a custom territory structure. They weren't using the territory entity, they were just using something completely different. This caused problems, and we had to have the very difficult conversation that, hey, you're not going to really get to be able to use RSO until you make that migration over to a real territory structure. So you might want to set those expectations and try to get them to use that before doing anything else. Also, be ready for the fight of your life. So Graph is a wonderful tool, but from a security perspective, not everybody's happy at the fact that you can see what's in someone's calendar. So be prepared to have that conversation with their IT with the security team at any department. Get ready for the conversation. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but don't be shocked if there are some initial security concerns. Now, for my personal learnings, what I learned was there is so much in D365 out of the box. Use it. Microsoft has a ton of offerings available in Azure that you could take advantage of. So you can literally, like Legos, you can build your own solutions, your own ways to accomplish whatever requirements that the customer has. Um, Microsoft Graph APIs, Graph has been around for a while. There wasn't a lot of documentation about it. There is now. So don't feel bad about leveraging anything that's available to you. Matter of fact, we encourage you to do it. And there's so much out there that can help you make the best solution. Really, your imagination is the limitation here. So for me, my personal learnings, just dig right in. It's well worth it, and you'll enjoy the outcome. And that's it. That's the end of my demonstration. I'm now going to open it up for Q&A. And I'll look at the chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. I think we've got a couple of things coming in.
Okay. That's really cool. Catch recording. Cool. With access to with Outlook calendars, so long as they have set to private appointment, the privacy option, yes, the privacy option would be the same. However, they are still able to see the start and end times. They are able to see the start and end times.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Just thought I'd clarify that because you said, security, but if they've got it set as private, then it's private. So as long as
just so
not an issue.
Yep. Sorry about that. But just so you know, there when you're getting access to it, you're granted admin access to it, and it changes. Like I've seen it literally change from month to month. Sometimes things are there, sometimes they aren't. Microsoft is still refining how this works, so don't be shocked if something changes. Okay, I'm not blaming them for it because it is amazing. I'm not at all. It is an amazing way to get information, and it is great. It's available and it's free. But be prepared to have that conversation with the security team. I would even recommend having a demo because that's what I did. And sometimes it goes good, sometimes it goes bad.
And this the universal resource scheduling, that is stuff that is literally out of the box. It's not nothing extra, is it?
No, it is amazing. Yes, it's out of the box. You can schedule any entity. Take the time to configure it first. Instead of, I know sometimes the approach is let's hack it, let's customize it with code. No, you can get a lot out of it just by configuring it the right way. Because we didn't have any devs initially on this project, so that's why configuration was our friend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to suggest that to the team. We've got one of those like auto demo booking request things, and I'm spending so much time manually checking people's calendars and booking it in. So this could be an ideal solution for that annoyance of mine.
Yeah, I would recommend also, and I'm gonna get to your question here in a second, Martin. I would definitely recommend looking up Antti. He's gonna kill me because I mess up his last name all the time. Help me out, Andrew. How do you say Antti's last name?
Paginen.
There you go. I'm sorry, Antti. I'm apologizing ahead of time. My fault, my friend. But he has really good Power Automates that he helped develop, and I mean, definitely take a look at it. It's good, and he has good explanations about that.
Awesome, lovely. Thank you very much for that.
Hey, no worries. Okay, Martin.
I'll put a link in the chat.
That'd be super.
Oh, I should have done that. My bad. Thanks. Right. So, Martin, to answer your question, do you also populate Outlook with field service bookings? Absolutely. I just didn't have time to demo that today. But yes, when you develop the Power Automate, again, Andrew's going to send the link out. There's a 2-part article. It'll talk about how taking bookings into Outlook as well. But you had to we did both, hence the bidirectional piece. But I didn't demo that, right? I just demoed one-way syncing. But yes, we did, for sure.
So I had a question related to that because I'm dealing with a customer at the moment, and I mentioned before they've got a big field. They're not sales; they're a field service team, and they're using field service, but they want to have people's Outlook bookings. If they're blocking out some time, like you said, if they've got to pick the kids up or they have a day off, they want to reflect that into the schedule board. In field service, and I was kind of I don't know a whole lot about field service, but I was kind of surprised that that wasn't just a feature, right? I think you mentioned there that there is this appointment to bookings that's in wave one. Is that? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So literally, it's using the same technology that we use for the D365 app for Outlook, and it's the same way when you track an appointment. The thing is, so last summer when we did this deployment, we didn't have appointments that created automatic booking records. We didn't do that. But we created a Power Automate to do just that. The only caveat is that the users have to track their appointments, right? In their calendar. That's the only gotcha. It's still functional. It works functionally speaking. It's great.
Right.
But if our group of users were, man, I feel like I'm being disrespectful. Sorry, it's a Southerner in me. They were a bunch of older gentlemen. They were gentlemen and gentle women. I don't how to say that right. They were like my parents. Let's put it that way. So, they're like, yeah, I don't want to have to track this. I just want it to work. And I'm like, so if your audience is open to a little bit of work, then they could have had all these processes for free, and it would have went well. Does that answer the question? So in wave one, that is on that's there. So you have appointment details on the schedule board as well as appointments to bookings. That's already there. So there's no need for a Power Automate to take the appointment and make a booking record for it. It's already there.
Okay,
you just have to make sure you set up D365 for Outlook. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. I need to look at that. Okay, fantastic.
I know. I had to too. I've been here for years. I had to look at that again. So, yeah.
Well, I'm the end users in this case are they work on construction sites, so they're quite technical in that they'll take bookings and they'll use field service, but relying on them to put everything in their diaries, that they're supposed to be doing and that they can't, work on a certain day. That's going to be the stretch.
So Andrew, like the one thing that I loved Rava. It was just the cost. You and I can have an offline conversation so I could set the expectation on the cost. But they worked with us. It did everything that you wanted. I mean,
right.
I can't say anything bad, but the overhead for, if you look at it for scale, they had 3,000 users. So times that times however amount they charged, it was too much. Yeah. But for an SMB, it's well worth it. It's worth its weight in gold. And you don't have to manage it because it's SaaS.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I've come across it a few times for different sorts of things, not this in particular. Yeah, I didn't realize it would be a per user kind of cost. I guess that makes sense because it's SaaS, but they have over 1,000 field staff, so that might, get expensive. Yeah, but yeah, I'd like to look at it some more though. Yeah, if it does, if it means that we don't have to build stuff that we then need to maintain and it's costing building it and everything else and testing it, then yeah,
and that's the value.
Make the argument. Yeah.
And that was the value in it. Like we were like, hey, if you're gonna use the Power Automates, you guys are gonna have to manage it. So when we were using, like I said, using those Delta queries, you had 3,000 users. I'm like, hey, you guys will need to set up a SQL database. We're gonna have to track these keys. I built out a proof of concept. I said, and we're running it like it's backups, so it's not getting real time. Oh, well, we'll just segment it based off of territory. Okay, who's gonna manage that? Because I'm not managing it. Who's gonna manage that? And I'm not signing off on that, So, okay, well, let's use change notifications. Yeah, but you still have to track and you still have to manage, and that's something that I'm constantly chewing on. Maybe like developing a cool Canvas app that will help make managing it a lot easier. But it's still management. They have to calculate that into their cost. And the thing with Rava, you don't have to manage that. That's them. And so they'll work with you price wise. When I tell you the price offline, you're gonna probably I might get in trouble for saying that. But when I tell you the price offline, you're gonna laugh. So trust me, you'll be fine.
Oh wow. That could go either way, couldn't it? Yeah. Okay. Look, I don't think we've got any more questions, but I just want to say thank you very much, Will. Thanks for joining us all from all the way over there. It's been a good session. And clearly you've had an interesting project there that's been built out in such a short amount of time. So that sounds good. Just remains for if we can have a little round of applause for Will for taking the time, appreciate that. And next up,
thank you everyone, appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Awesome, thank you. Next up we have 2 sessions going, oh no, sorry, 3 sessions, which is Mark Carrington doing a developer session on plugin pipelines. We have the Chris Huntingford show with Claire Edgson from Avanade talking about whether customer engagement still needs to exist anymore. And then we have a good session on consultants versus recruiters with Joel Abbott and some other recruitment folks in there. So that should be an interesting conversation. But yeah, I will drop a link in the chat to the agenda, but I just want to say again, thanks very much to Will. Recording will be up in a few days if you did miss any of that, but thanks a lot. Thanks, Will.
Thank you all. Appreciate it again at any time. Thanks for having me.
No problem.